Welcome to this special episode of the Fine Homebuilding Podcast. We're coming to you today live from the 2026 International Builder Show. We're in the VERSATEX booth and they're sponsoring this episode where we'll attempt to answer the burning question, is a low-maintenance exterior really possible? Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Fine Homebuilding's editorial director, Brian Pontolilo, and we're coming to you today live from the 2026 International Builder Show in Orlando, Florida. VERSATEX is sponsoring this episode and hosting us in their booth this morning. And so I thought it'd be a good topic of conversation for the episode to discuss low-maintenance exteriors. If you're unfamiliar with VERSATEX, they manufacture PVC siding and trim and have a number of solution-oriented product lines, but I'll let them speak about that a little bit more later in the episode. So first, I'm going to introduce you to today's panel. I think you'll be familiar with the first two guests. We have Randy Williams and Mark Petersen. Randy is the editor of Green Building Advisor and a former builder who knows a thing or two about choosing and installing exterior siding and trim. So good morning, Randy.
Good morning.
And Mark Petersen, again, you guys are all familiar with Mark. He's a contributing editor at Fine Homebuilding. He's responsible for our tools and materials coverage. Mark is also a judge at the Builders Show this year in their new product category, I believe in the tech area, and a former siding installer. So another great fit for today's podcast. So good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Do you want to just tell us briefly about what it means to be a judge in IBS's?
It means a lot more time than I thought it was going to take. So they put me in the tech category. So they give us about 30 products to choose from, and that we have to judge and go through 1 through 10. And 30 products. If you want to take it seriously, I mean, you could spend half an hour on each one researching it. And you do really. So it was a lot more work, but it was fun. I mean, I've enjoyed it. And so now they whittled it down to, I think there's 7 left in my category. So sometime before the end of tomorrow, I got to visit each booth and make sure, pick my final.
So they give you samples to bring home or something to try out? Or how do you know what they're like?
You can call, you just really got to research on the internet. I mean, the only tricky parts were some of them, they didn't release the press release until a little bit, later. So it was kind of like a week before, you didn't even know what you're dealing with. So, but it was, it's been fun. It's more challenging than I thought.
And you said it's the tech category?
Tech, yeah.
Tech.
So you're talking
examples?
like new breaker panels, that shed energy based on EV charging and all that sort of thing, from elevators to thermostats to electronic pet doors.
Okay.
So
yeah, interesting. Because when you said tech, I was thinking software, stuff like that would be really hard to research.
It would. That would have been harder. Yeah. But even like a thermostat, I mean, they're interesting products, but it's hard to determine, all right, what does this one do versus the other one. So it's been great.
And I will mention also that, Randy, you're doing a bunch of things here at the show. The only reason I'm not going to tell people what they are is because this podcast is going to air the day after the show ends. So, but keep in mind that if you're listening to this podcast, if you've never been to the International Builders Show, if it's any encouragement to come, people like Randy and Mark and myself and all the people that you know from Fine Homebuilding and from the world of building media are here at the show, presenting, speaking, demonstrating. So it's a really cool place to go meet these people, talk to them, network, all that kind of stuff. But before we go on into the show, I need to get to our last introduction. We're also joined today by Daniel Sutton. Daniel's a project manager at VERSATEX. And welcome, Daniel. And would you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, guys. Hey, it's good to be here. It's my second time being at IBS and here with VERSATEX. So I've been with VERSATEX now almost a couple years. So I handle a lot of the day-to-day stuff with new product development, managing the portfolio. So excited to talk to you guys about PVC.
Yeah, can you? I've always been curious about the job of product manager at building materials companies and exactly what that means in terms of how do you work to develop products and take them from where, I guess to start off, where do the ideas come from and what's sort of the process of shepherding a product from concept to the marketplace where a builder's using it?
So kind of from inception to launch, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those ideas really come from our customers, right? The end users of the product. Like, hey, we thought this would be a good idea, or we're making this, but it takes us a long time to mill it. Can you create this extrusion or this new product and sell it direct? And a lot of times that's what we do. What happens with us is it's really a group effort behind the scenes. So as a product manager, think of it as more of a quarterback, right? You have to know a little about a lot of different things. And what you do is you bring people together, right? So I interface with R&D, our applications team, process engineering, everything on a day-to-day basis. And what we have to do is like, here's our idea. How do we execute it? How can we extrude it? What testing do we have to do to ensure that, hey, this is going to meet the requirements out in the public when we go to launch this?
Yeah, awesome. And I did notice that I've noticed over the years, and that a lot of building material manufacturers have become more, I always use the term solutions oriented. I don't know if that really means anything, but like, for example, when zip system sheathing came out, it seemed to be this like solution to taking steps out of the process of sheathing your house and putting house wrap on your house. And I noticed that your sort of VERSATEX seems to be doing the same kind of thing with different types of moldings, right, that are already milled to wrap a post, for example.
Yep.
And so is that something that you're talking about internally, and is that a goal?
Yeah, it's always about trying to make things better, right? What are the customers going to want, right? So for a couple of examples behind you, you're going to see that we have some corner pieces, right? Traditionally, you could use just traditional trim boards, butt join them together, and there's your corner. We can do it as a one piece, right? So you can pop it up on the wall, kind of install it, set it and forget it. With column wraps, it's the same thing. Traditionally, you could use 4 different pieces, glue them together. Now we have a one-piece solution. It just all folds around together. You can install it in 10 minutes. It's really about making it easier for the end user.
Yes.
It's
very cool.
It's been my impression after coming to these shows a lot. It just seems like every year there's just more and more new products, and I'm guessing part of that is just the technology that goes into designing these, where let's say 40 years ago, if you were going to come out with a new profile, I mean, you kind of just had to invest tons of money in this mold, where I'm assuming that a lot of it's now computer analyzed, computer generated, so you really know what you're getting into before you even start physically building an extrusion process, right? Or
there's a lot of that with regards to like new profiles and trims. We'll do a lot with CAD. We even have kind of a 3D printer we do some prototyping on, right? For a siding component, it was massive that we were exploring that we had to sub it out to get a 3D print of something, right? We want to invest that time and some of that initial energy in doing that prototyping, because we don't want to get too far down the road with extrusion where you're buying those dies and adding hundreds of thousands of dollars to find out that the product may not work, or you got to go back and change something, and it keeps adding on to that cost. We try to do as much upfront as possible to mitigate that down the road.
Yeah.
How much time do you have from the time that you kind of develop that first one, you've got something in your hand, and then it gets into the testing phase where you're actually in the field? How's this reacting? How's this moving? Is this what we're expecting? Is there a lot of testing that goes along with that?
A lot of like field trials and stuff like that. It's really going to depend on the component. Like if you're talking trim or a different profile, like say we're testing a new inside corner, right? That's very easy. We can throw that through the milling machine. We can get those different components out there, and we can have the contractors do a little VOC. What do you like? What do you not like? How would you do this? Install it a little bit different. When it gets into siding, some of those components take, that new product development could be 18 to 24 months. We would love to do it sooner, but it's getting that prototyping, it's getting the molds, the equipment needed to do it, running parts, and then you have to take it through the paces on the test walls, wind load testing, things like that, which are just some of those unforeseen things. I can't just launch a siding product and not know what kind of wind loads it's going to...
That's a lot of risk.
100%, yeah.
All right, so I guess before we dive into our theme for this morning's podcast, all you listening out there, keep in mind that you can find previous podcast episodes and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. And that when we're not doing something special like this, we're answering your questions and sharing your comments. So send them to us at FHBpodcast@finehomebuilding.com. So, okay, let's dive into the theme for this morning, which is the idea of low maintenance exteriors, it's actually it's a little bit of a buzzword, but it's actually something where there's a lot of meat on the bone with this topic. And when I was thinking about questions to ask, the first thing that came to my mind was, can we flip this question and ask, what's a high maintenance exterior? What is it that we're trying to avoid when we design and build for a low maintenance exterior? Do you guys, anyone have examples of something?
Painting, obviously, painting comes to mind.
Yep.
I mean, painting is, it's expensive. and it takes a long time. It's a kind of and it's. I don't think there's enough painting contractors who take it seriously enough to where you can spend a lot of money, and if it's not done, everything's brought down to the right, to the right surface level, so it's going to adhere. It's kind of a nightmare. It can be a nightmare.
And then even after you get that far, is it going to do it again in another 2 years?
Right.
Is it going to just fall back off?
Yeah, because if you have moisture behind anything that's somewhat porous, it's not going to hold, no matter what you do.
And would you think the same is true of any finished, like a stained exterior or a clear finished exterior? Same thing, kind of?
Well, it depends where it is, too. So I just made some shed roofs that have an under, like a soffit area. And I used wood there, and I felt somewhat comfortable. Of course, we got carpenter bees, which are kind of a nightmare. So you're fighting those all the time. But so it depends. I wouldn't have done a dark color stain anywhere that's going to get hit by the sun.
Well, you look at a log structure, a true log structure. I mean, that's the ultimate. I mean, you've got maintenance involved in that. If you've got chinking, you're trying to maintain that, make that look good. But that's also part of the water management. You don't want that water getting into the joints. But a lot of those structures, they're, every 10 years, you're basically refinishing that entire structure. And sometimes you're actually pulling what was off there to redo the whole thing. It's not just a touch-up. It's stripping it, corncob blasting or whatever to get that down to the bare wood again and then redoing it. And you think houses are a lot of work. I mean, you take up one of those and it's every 10 years or sometimes less.
Or even, even brick. You still got to repoint brick. I mean, sometimes depending where you're at, what part of the country, how well that masonry was done to begin with. That's a huge. I've done a couple of not me personally, but I've had contractors do repointing, and it's a lot of work.
Can we just go back to something Randy just said? Corncob blasting? Is this a northern Minnesota thing, Randy?
No, it's. I actually took some log training a few years ago, and it is a big process. It's those guys that do that. They've got crews that run around. Some of them are, in pretty big regions.
Yeah,
they might cover 6 or 8 states and. For instance, Minnesota and the surrounding states, and they run around to different log structures, and that's what their job is, to maintain them. And some of these structures, they're fancy.
They're corncob blasting. So this is similar to like sand blasting or something.
Yeah. And it's just not as
there's
different medias. There's different medias that they can use. And
interesting.
Corncob is one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. I learned something. Learned something today. Anyone want to take a crack at defining low maintenance then? What are we looking for? What are the goals when it comes to a low maintenance exterior?
I'm going to go just one step further and say, how about no maintenance? And,
oh boy.
And I'm going to say, really, there is not the right thing, right? There's no such thing as a no maintenance product. I mean, you think of a really low maintenance product like glass, for instance. It doesn't fade. It doesn't, there's nothing to refinish. You might have to caulk the edges or something like that, but it still requires maintenance, right? You've got to clean it.
Yes.
And that's true of any
I would think so.
product.
But and maybe Dan can address this, but I've noticed more lately because 10 years ago, nobody said no maintenance. Nobody ever uttered those words, no maintenance. I am starting to see that a little bit now. So is that a change, Dan, as far as wording goes? Are you guys saying no maintenance, or?
I think we still say low maintenance.
Okay.
I think from a legal perspective, maybe we
So
can't
it's
go full zero maintenance. Because like you said, everything has a little bit of touch up here and there, right? Especially when it comes to siding, you may have to touch it up, right? It might get nicked or something. Maybe you have to replace a panel because, your kid hits a golf ball into it. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
But generally with the products that we have, we would refer to everything as low maintenance.
And maybe that's another thing we didn't address as far as the low maintenance category is how durable is it? I mean, if you have kids playing in the background in the backyard and they hit a baseball against this PVC or a brick, it's not going to leave a dinger, but wood, cedar, redwood or cedar side or redwood or cedar siding, that stuff's
or a piece of steel siding.
Oh yeah, or aluminum. Yeah, we put on a lot of aluminum back in the day. That stuff was, you couldn't lean up against it. Some of the thin stuff.
So we've got a couple of things that have been mentioned so far that you're trying to avoid when you think about a low maintenance exterior. We talked about having to finish it regularly and maybe even complex painting or a refinishing job. And we're talking about durability. What other maintenance issues are there? And Randy talked about cleaning glass, for example. These are all maintenance issues. What other types of maintenance issues might we be trying to avoid with
Well, like I know that the cement products had a problem where if you leave a bunch of leaves or debris, up against a roof corner or some type of even the lower corner of a building where it's hitting the siding, it'll absorb that moisture and turn into which is really kind of weird because I've put a piece of that in a bucket for 6 months and nothing happened, but I've gone to houses where that stuff is just deteriorated. So it's just I don't know if it's a combination of the oxygen and the moisture, but that's another thing where what can you do with it? All of a sudden the next homeowner comes along and pushes the grade up because you're supposed to have 6 inches, pushes the grade up so it's 1 inch or less, or build a patio where all that water is kind of splashing on it. So yeah, it's all of that.
Yeah. And then I guess like staining and other types of discoloration. So maybe washing is a maintenance issue. A lot of people power wash their houses, which we know to be a bad idea.
It's in staining. Restaining is tough to make it look. I had a neighbor who built a beautiful house on a lake, and it was all stained a pretty dark color. And he, in the front gable, he just wasn't really happy with it. And I'm like, he asked my opinion. I'm like, I personally have never tried to fix a bad stain job and made it look any better. So actually the guys did come out and make it a little bit better, but it's kind of dicey because you just, once it's stained that original, it's gorgeous for the first, it's 8 months, but then redoing it's
you got to get a little darker every time.
Yeah. And do an excellent job of removing and picking the next thing, oil over water, water over oil, all that stuff.
So I've made this argument on podcasts before, but I think that the most low maintenance exterior you can get, the one that's the closest to no maintenance at all, are natural materials left to weather. A slate roof, cedar siding, cedar trim, left to weather. Anyone agree or disagree?
I would disagree with the cedar nowadays because it's so. I would say an old growth cedar would last for 100 years. The cedar they're cutting down that are 18 inches big. I've seen it actually, matter of fact, I just had a cedar bench that I made just demolished, and it was 6-8 years, and it was sitting, it was well drainage, but it was out in the weather and it demolished. So it depends how you keep it dry. I mean, if you got a rain screen or, behind it depends, I suppose, too, but.
Yeah. Randy, do you agree with that sort of the premise that natural wood is of lower quality these days than it used to be? Because I hear this a lot, and it makes sense, but I don't have experience to know whether.
Yeah, it's. I mean, think of what we were building with 100 years ago. It was old growth timber, right?
Yeah.
In my market, I'm in northern Minnesota. That's when they were working on the big white pines. They were taking them down, and they were going to the mills. That wood, if you looked at the grain structure of that wood, it was so close. It was such a beautiful piece of wood. It didn't move much. It absorbed and released water easily without damaging the interior. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
The grains are so far apart that it moves moisture completely different the way, through the product. So it's a big difference.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Dan. You may have thoughts on this from a perspective of a manufacturer too, but now that we've sort of talked a bit about exterior maintenance, what's likely, what's possible, what is entailed, is there a gap between what homeowners ask for and expect and what we can actually deliver as builders, installers, and manufacturers? Like, are people expecting no maintenance?
I think more and more that is what we're hearing, right? So a lot of the new product development and things that we have in the pipeline is because people want that low maintenance aspect, right? With cellular PVC. That's why we have all these different trim profiles. We're coming out with different ones. We're coming out with the PVC siding, the painting, the staining aspects that you guys all talked about, the rotting and things with wood. We can achieve that same look with PVC with like a wood lamina, that it's going to look as good as it was, 15 years later, this day you installed it. You don't have to go back and do that staining where you were talking about those examples you were talking about earlier. So I think a lot of our customers are starting to expect that, and that's becoming the new norm, at least from what we have seen.
Mm-hmm. Mark, what was your experience when you were a siding installer and you were talking to people? Were people asking? That was a while ago. Were people asking about maintenance and...
I worked for a big production builder. So we were siding 300 plus houses a year, and we put on some pretty awful product. It was just, I mean, it was mostly vinyl, but we did some steel and aluminum, as an upgrade. But the nailing flanges were terrible. So, a lot of it, I guess, was people thought it was low maintenance, so they just didn't understand how it worked. So they would attach a deck right over the surface of it, or have their grill right next to it and just melt it. So it was. But that being said, there was some to Minnesota that it kind of was almost a natural rain screen, so it actually did help the product dry out behind it a little bit. So there wasn't all terrible, and it was affordable. A lot of these were starter homes. These are starter homes that were cost $90,000 to $100,000, and if you would have added another $10,000, that probably would have took 20% of the people that could afford that house. So they served their purpose, but it wasn't. I didn't look back and say, "Oh boy, I wish they made that stuff again."
How about Randy, up in your neck of the woods? People care about this topic?
Yeah, I was just working with a builder a couple of years ago that they actually had a job where they took a nice cedar siding off the house and put on an artificial just because they didn't want the maintenance. They said, we're done with that. We're going to do something different. A little disappointing to see, it all went in a dumpster. It wasn't that bad of a product, but what do you do? It's the customer wanted something that they didn't want to take care of. It was something that they didn't want to think about it. Of course, there's some thinking about it, right? They've got to go let's clean it, but
yeah.
Actually, that brings up I have a question for Dan. So when some of the products got better as time went along, but one of the main things that they had issues with when they came out, because it was all light colors. It was, it was kind of a running joke with my partner. It's like, are they going to pick tan or tan? Because that's basically all you had. And then they came out with their acrylic version of these vinyl products, and they made it harder to work with because they got brittle. They got really brittle and hard to work with in Minnesota. And I'm in Minnesota too. And then some of these early versions, they didn't hold up. I mean, they faded. Some of them were bad. So I was going to ask, when you mentioned the process of bringing something to market, how do you do that? Because if you put a 50-year warranty on, some of your products have 50-year warranties on them, don't they? Mm-hmm. How would you possibly know that a finish is going to last 50 years?
So we work a lot with our capstock suppliers. So those who make the pigments for the cap when we co-extrude.
Can you tell listeners what capstock is?
So capstock is just the colored cap, acrylic cap that goes on, say, our siding product out here. So right now we have 10 colors. We're exploring a few more. But what we look at with PVC, because it is susceptible to, say, temperature and movement and things like that, we want to make sure that we're lowering that heat build. So we look at those specific capstocks that have that lower heat build that we know we can control the movement and look at the product of that. But also, we put that through so much advanced weathering that we're going through third party and doing it in-house through like QUV and xenon light weathering systems. So we can look at and see, is this capstock fading? If it is, then we have to pivot and go to another one. But the one that we've been working with so far has been great. They have 20-some plus thousand hours of advanced weathering, and there's no fade to it, right? Mm-hmm. So we feel very confident in that and how it's going to hold up versus the early stages, maybe 30 years ago when they were coming out with these acrylic capstocks, and it would fade within a couple of weeks in direct sun.
A couple of weeks, yeah. If I had to come back, so part of my job for that builder is I'd have to go back. Once a year, me and the service guy would go around to every single house and find a leak or fix whatever, repair a piece of siding that got damaged, whatever. Within a year, I put a piece of siding on it, just especially if it was in the middle of the wall. It just stood out like a sore. I was like, oh, this is awful. I would, but I felt bad for the homeowners because they weren't going to get their whole wall replaced, but it was the fading thing is just so light years ahead of where it was back then.
Yeah, and that's a real, I did a remodel maybe 15 years ago now, and we put fiber cement on the house on a ventilated rain screen. We did everything we could as well as we could to give. We were going to paint the fiber cement, so we did everything we could to give it the best shot at a long-lasting exterior finish. And I drive by this house pretty regularly still, and the paint has held up remarkably well, but it's faded a ton.
Yeah.
It's not remarkably well, meaning not peeling, no other sort of like degradation, but the color is the south side of the house, which is the side that you can see from the road, so it's the side I see. It's faded. It's a different color.
Right. Yeah.
It's really a different color. Dan, I wanted to ask you, Mark had mentioned like he said that he installed a bunch of crappy siding products, and he mentioned vinyl siding, and vinyl and PVC are similar material makeup. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the difference between the material of, common vinyl siding, and also like installation details between that and a PVC vinyl siding like you all make.
So the cellular PVC siding that we have is a little bit, it's going to be thicker than your traditional vinyl, right? Vinyl is going to be a little bit more flimsy. This is going to be like a clapboard type PVC trailer siding setup. Now what that is when it's thicker, it's going to be more durable, right? So it'll be able to take that impact, but it's also going to float. It's designed to be a floating system similar to a vinyl install, right? So you're going to make sure you put your nails in, leave that 30-second gap, and let that move. It's going to move like vinyl, just not as much. So there's a lot of similarities, but it's also different in a lot of ways.
So
cellular is different than the product. The type of PVC is different, because I'm not 100% sure what the difference between a cellular PVC versus like the typical vinyl siding PVC.
So the vinyl, I can't speak to the vinyl one per se, right? But on the cellular side, what we do is we have the different components that go in, and there's actually a little bit of a blowing agent that gives it that cellular type structure, so it'll increase in mass a little bit as it comes out of the extruder. So that's when we say it's cellular. That's how we get that thickness compared to traditional vinyl.
Because if you look if you were to slice it and look at the end of it, it kind of looks like straws, right? Or kind of holes in it. You'd have to look very closely,
okay. Maybe, and you might see some of the holes on that. I think we have some samples in there we can actually pull out. Because on the spot now, I'm thinking no, but yeah, it's definitely thicker. You might see a little bit of the subtle pockets just from that blowing agent as it blows up. So.
And you mentioned movement, and Randy and I were talking about this a little bit at breakfast, because I think for a builder who maybe, or a carpenter maybe used to working with wood, they're used to thinking about movement pretty regularly, but it moves differently than wood, right?
Yeah. So the movement in PVC is going to happen in the length, right? It's not going to swell across the width like you'll see with a lot of wood boards. So that movement is going to go long, lengthwise. So that's why it's important if you're looking at it from a siding perspective, making sure that you know what your install temperatures are, right? What's the temp of that board when you put it up on the wall, so you can accommodate, what's my run length? How far do I have to put it into this pocket? Because at the end of the day, you don't want that thing to, the siding to contract enough where it comes out of the pocket, or expand too much where it fully extended into the pocket, and then you have the oil canning that could occur. So there's some nuances that you have to account for when you're installing it compared to, say, maybe wood.
So when you say pocket, you're talking about trim that is milled to lap over the and
good
so
channel.
So is that a detail that you always recommend for your siding, or
absolutely
not butt it up against?
Yeah, because if you just had a solid piece of trim board and you butt it up, you're going to see that gap open it up as it, the expansion and contraction of the product and the heat and the cold cycles. So when you have a pocket, or what we have is our stealth trim is what we call it, it has that pocketed flange where you depending on your install temperature and the ambient temperature, you have that specific depth that you set that siding into. And as it expands and contracts, that movement stays within the pocket, so it always looks nice and clean on the exterior.
Yeah.
I have a question. It occurred to me, wood expands by its width just because of the orientation of the cells that are the fibers in the cells. Does PVC expands length? Is that strictly because it's longer that way or thicker? So I guess my question is, if you had a 4x4 square of PVC, would it expand the same in all directions?
No, it's always going to
different. Okay,
it will expand in that lengthwise because of how it's extruded, right?
Okay.
So it's always going to follow that movement.
I guess that didn't occur to me. I just assumed because it was narrower, it just didn't expand.
Randy asked the exact same question at breakfast. I didn't know.
Great minds, man.
I didn't know the answer. Dan, one more question before we start to wrap up the episode. Is there anything that in your booth here at the show, or any that you're excited that you're showing, anything that's new that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, I would say what we're most excited about is we've launched our Exceed siding. It's our cellular PVC siding. It's been out for roughly 3 years or so now. So we're really excited to show it off as another aspect of what a maintenance-free cladding could look like, right? It comes in 10 great colors in our acrylic cap stocks. We have that limited lifetime warranty on it for the fade and things like that. So we're giving that assurance to the end user. Hey, select this product. You won't have to worry about it on your home. The other aspect that we like to always promote here is our Canvas series. It's been out now for about probably closer to 10 years. But again, it's all about low maintenance. So it takes those cellular PVC boards, we can mill them into different profiles, whether it's beadboard, a WP4 profile. We laminate it, and then you get that wood-like texture on the feel. You can use it for accent walls, ceiling soffits, things of that nature. But again, you don't have to paint it, you don't have to seal it, you don't have to do any of that staining periodically. It's made to last. We're very excited about those product lines.
What about? I'm curious about. You don't have to paint it. What about cuts? And do you have to treat the cut ends in any way, like you would if you were wood?
So with PVC in general, you don't have to paint it. You don't have to seal those ends. It's impervious to mold and moisture and anything like that. So depending on how you're installing it, if you do have a cut face, we have color match stoppers and things like that. If you're hiding it within the pockets, you don't need No worries.
But standard trim, once you cut an edge, you kind of lose that protective finish to it. Isn't there? How do you make? So let's say you're making a planter box or something, and you have those exposed cut ends. Mm-hmm. Isn't there a way to seal those up somehow?
You could use some fine sandpaper to sand down the edges, right? You want to close those cellulose. You could also paint it if it's white, or a different color.
Because it won't hurt it. It'll pick up more dust.
It may, because it's a cellular core. It may absorb, so you might get a little bit dirty. You might see that over time. But there's no integrity loss to that product at all. So purely it comes down to aesthetics. You may want to paint it just for that reason.
Sure.
Is there a specific paint that you need to use for that product?
An acrylic latex paint. And then also color's going to play a factor as well. You want to look at an LRV of 55 and higher. So if 0 is black and 100 is white, 55 and above is what you want to do. Now there's a wide range of colors there. If you want to go dark, you want to make sure you're using those heat reflective pigments in the paint that allow you, because black's a very popular color right now, you just want to make sure you're using the right black, the right types of paint with those pigments in them.
Okay. So it's not a fading thing, it's going to make the product expand and contract more than it's designed to.
Yeah, so when you get those darker colors, it'll take on more heat, but if you have that heat reflective pigments, it kind of mitigates that issue.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your siding, and what I liked about it was, I don't know what the technology is called, but they stack.
Yes.
So if you have a row of siding, the next piece stacks on top of that instead of and it just sits there. So unlike cement board or, you don't have to hold it in place. So if you can do it, one person can do it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Did you do that by design, or was that just because it was easier to manufacture that way?
It's all by design. So we call that our VZ drop lock technology. So on the backside is a flange that helps it interlock on the course below. And then we also have for Exceed, we have all of the Exceed trims that you would need, like your starter boards or starter profiles, band boards, things like that all have that same drop lock technology. So as long as your first row is set, you can keep interlocking the whole way up the facade and never really have. You can check it periodically, but it's not going to walk on you. It's always going to maintain that levelness the whole way up.
I just like the fact that it's you don't have to kind of hold it. Yeah.
Does it lock you into one exposure? Does it lock you into one exposure for your siding?
6-inch or 8-inch?
Or can you adjust that as?
It should all interlock. You could, if you want to go from a 7.5 to a 4.5, or.
Well, siding installers are often playing with
5 1/4.
The exposure on the way up to make, have their courses lined up with windows and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how much play do you have?
Is that possible? Is there any play in it when
you're? There's a little bit of play, yeah. So it's probably a little bit more. How would I say this? Just make sure you have that awareness as you go, right? So if you're just doing traditional clapboard and working your way up, maybe you have a little bit more flexibility. But because you have that interlocking feature, that's all designed to help with the wind loading, right? So you don't want to cut some of those attributes out, or else you'll lose some of the design elements of the siding.
All right. Mark and Randy, what else outside of the VERSATEX booth? What else are you guys going to be looking at? Anything on your mind to check out this year?
I think I got 20 booth visits lined up.
What are a couple of the most interesting to you?
There's There's a job site camera that's pretty interesting that works off a cell phone, and it's got some other features that are kind of neat.
Okay.
And then, actually, I was at the Delta booth and saw this how the overhead showers are more popular, the ones that come straight down on you. Well, this one has a hydro-generated light, like an accent light. That's really, I don't know why, but I thought that was cool.
Because it's hydro-generated.
Yeah, right.
Cool.
You get to say my hydro-generated light in my bathroom.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always fun stuff. I never get tired of this thing.
Randy, anything?
I just blew through the one little area of the show before we came to this booth, and I ran into the Weedy people, the custom shower. There's not that they've got a new product, but I didn't realize that they had some of the training programs that they have, and I want to go chat with them and get a little more information on that. Yeah.
Do you guys do training, Dan?
We do training, yeah. Yeah, we have a new training center down in Aliquippa at our second plant. So we'll bring people in. We have kind of a hands-on demonstration area. They can hang siding, they can hang or put up their column wraps. So yeah, we like to do some hands-on training and some product knowledge.
Nice. I think that's
huge.
really smart.
That did not exist when I was working.
No, and Randy mentioned Weedy, but Schluter, I think one of the reasons why their products were adopted so fast was because they had these excellent trainings that they would bring you to. You'd pay your way, but they would train you for a weekend for free to use their stuff. Smart.
Yes, and Thermo-True doors were one of the first companies that I worked with that did that. And guess what kind of doors I brought?
Right. All right. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Randy, Mark, and Dan. Thanks to VERSATEX for sponsoring this episode. Thanks to everyone for listening. And remember to send your questions, your suggestions to the FHB podcast at finehomebuilding.com. Please like, comment, and review us, no matter how you're listening, because that's what helps other people find us. Thanks, everyone. Happy building.
It was great. Thanks.
Guys.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and thanks to our panelists and the folks at VERSATEX for hosting and sponsoring this episode. We'll be back next week with a regular episode of the podcast where we answer listener questions and share their feedback. See you then.